plus my mom. Why don't you start yet? There we go. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. O heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, art everywhere and fills all things. Treasure your blessings and giver of life, come and abide with us, cleanse us from every impurity, save our souls, O good one, through the prayers of the Holy Fathers. Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Welcome back to Orthodoxy 101. You can sit. And today we are continuing our preparation for Lent. If you remember last week, we talked about prayer. This week we're going to talk about fasting, the three key points of Lent: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So next week we're going to talk about stewardship and what we mean by almsgiving in the church. And those are the three foundational things that we're supposed to focus on when we enter Great Lent. So I thought it would be good that we do a couple of these as we move into Lent. And then I think the following Sunday after that, we will do the pre-Lenten Sundays. We'll talk about the pre-Lenten Sundays that we just did. And then after that, not the first week of Lent, the second week of Lent, the Father Anthony, our seminarian, will be talking about the Lenten Sunday. So we have a lot of cool things coming up in the class. So fasting. And this is an important topic for us because, God, I get a lot of questions about fasting. It just seems that always somehow people want to know more about it. And there's a lot of misconceptions about fasting itself in the church. And of course, when you talk to a non-Orthodox and you explain all the fasting you do, and they look at you like you're crazy. But so let's talk a little bit about what we mean, and then talk about the different fasting seasons in the church, and then more specifically what we can do during Great Lent. So first thing is, let's clear up a few misconceptions. As I've mentioned many times, not only in these podcasts, but in the sermons, when you hear Christ say, when you do something, do it like this. Like when you pray like this, and he gives us the Lord's Prayer. He had one of the other subjects he says is when you fast like this. So when you hear that, we should immediately pay attention because this is a direct commandment from Christ. This is not just how we interpret it. He's telling you how to interpret it. He's telling you what to do. So it is a part of an essential part of being a Christian. Fasting is an important thing, and we're going to hear a little bit about from some of the church fathers and why it's so important for us to do the fasting. But again, by the way, the two other things that Christ commands: one is prayer, one is fasting, and the other one is forgiveness. So when you think about those three things, those are all an essential kind of foundational thing of being a Christian. I'll start with a story because I always like to start with stories. So St. Seraphim of Sarov, that famous Orthodox saint, one time had a mother come to him and she asked advice on how she should find a husband for her daughter. And so listen up, parents, about this. How do you find a good husband for your daughter? And this is the advice she gave him. He gave her. Before all else, ensure that he, whom your daughter chooses as her companion for life, keeps the fasts. And if he does not, then he is not a Christian, whatever he may consider himself to be. So think about that. Isn't that interesting that, St. Seraphim of Sarov, so we should listen to him, but why would he say something like that? Like, when you are considering a spouse for your daughter, a man who fasts, why is that? Well, because fasting is not only a way in which we live a very tangible part of our Christian life, but it's also a way in which a person who does that has a certain discipline in their life and a certain focus on their life and a certain way of looking at the world in their life. And so when we think about that, that's what it has to be within us. It's not the fast that's important necessarily, but it's the why are you fasting? What's the whole, in other words, it's not the means, it's the end. It's what are we trying to struggle and do here with fasting? If you're just giving up meat for Lent, but you're being nasty to your neighbor and you're yelling at your spouse and you're kicking the dog and doing all those sort of things, then it's all worthless. But if you're using it in a way that is to build up your spiritual life and to focus on Christ, then that's why it becomes such an important part of what we are. So here's a quote from Matthew 6:16. And this, by the way, all of Matthew 6 is just a great passage to read about how to be a Christian and how to live a Christian life. But here in there. So this is from Christ. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received your reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So isn't that interesting? So first and foremost, Christ is telling us, not if you fast, or maybe, but when you fast. So he's assuming that you understand this and that we are fasting. Second, he's telling you to be joyful in your fasting. In fact, in the Old Testament, the Judaism, fasting was a way of celebrating, because you were giving up things in honor of the Lord. And I think that's how we need to recover that in our own lives. It's not a discipline of despair, but rather a discipline of joy. And so second, be joyful in fasting. And that's why he says, wash your face and put oil in your face. What does that mean? In other words, so you don't look emaciated and sort of, drawn in, but rather you look lively and joyful and healthy, shall we say. And then the other one is do it in secret. In other words, no one should know what you're fasting. The only person who you probably share it with is your father confessor. I get that question a lot in confessions about people not being able to keep the fast, or struggling with the fast, or even as they get older, what can they do? So do it in secret, and do it so that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and never make it a point of contention within the family. It should be something of an agreement that you're all doing. So again, what they're saying basically is, don't talk about it, just do it. And don't judge other people on how they fast. So here's another quote from the gospel. Romans 14. Following. Accept the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. And the one who eats everything must not treat the one with contempt, the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their master servants stand and fall, and they will stand for the Lord is able to make them stand. One person considers one day more sacred than another, and another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. So whatever regards one day as special does so to the Lord, and whoever eats meat does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to the God. And whoever abstains does so to the Lord and gives thanks to God. In other words, saying, whether you eat meat or don't eat meat, you're giving thanks to God. For none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. And for this reason, Christ died and returned to life, that he might be the Lord of both the living and the dead. So in other words, don't judge one another. Right? But yet it's interesting, because you look at the monastic, sort of like the Philokalia, the Desert Fathers, and there was kind of a spiritual competition in these monasteries about who could fast the longest and who can fast the strongest, but as some of the church fathers say, that was a good competition, because they were trying to outdo each other in a sense, not out of a sense of putting the other one down, but out of a sense of spiritual athleticism, shall we say. But if you start to judge the person, or you start to lord it over the other person, then it loses its whole effect. So that's why in here we come to this kind of key point. Fasting is intensely personal, and it should liberate us from our passions. That's the whole point of it, right? And you read the church fathers, they talk about that. The reason we fast is to liberate ourselves from the passions. Think about it. You eat a big meal, or you drink too much wine, or you do whatever, what happens? You get lazy. You lay on the couch. My family, you called it on anaconda mode. Like an anaconda ate like a feral pig, and then it just lays there and digests for days. So you don't want to do that. You have to keep yourself sharp, and you don't. And when you lay around and just do that, then that's when the passions attacked us. I remember there was an Orthodox priest. He wrote a little pamphlet. This was many, many years ago, and he called it Lent as a Liberation. And I think that's the way we have to look at it. What are we liberating ourselves? We're liberating ourselves from the passions and the desires and the things of this world and trying to focus on something else, something more important. But as St. John Chrysostom always says, fasting is not, again, an end, and it should always be accompanied by prayers and almsgiving. And that, John Chrysostom has a lot of advice on that. And again, it's a discipline. And so he says, for the money that you save from not eating these meals during Lent, you should be collecting that money and giving it to the poor. And so it's always important. And St. Clement, he talks about, we were just talking about, when we eat too much, we get too lazy to even pray. And so this is important. John Chrysostom also goes on to write about how fasting is a medicine to heal what spiritually ails us. We must know how and when to use it, and when it does good and not more harm. And sometimes, and this is something I've seen a lot of times, people who become new to the faith, become new to Orthodoxy. Great topic, I realize you've been teaching. Oh, okay, I'm just reading my comments here. So they really want to fast and really, really want to do it right, and they get so excited, and you watch them start Lent, and by like halfway through Lent, they're collapsing. They can't do it. And because, again, it's like, you can't expect me to go run a marathon. I have to train for that. Well, fasting is a marathon, and so you have to build it up in time. I remember one beloved parishioner of mine in Las Vegas, a very pious young man, and he really was on fire for the faith, and he wanted to do the monastic fast for the first week of Lent, which was just eating a little bit of bread each day and a little bit of water, and try to get through the whole week. He didn't make it. And I yelled at him. I said, why did you try to do that? You have to train yourself to do that. And so with anything like with Lent, you train yourself. We know what the ideal is. We always reach for the ideal, but we know we're going to fall short. So what we can do now is try to keep it moving forward. So each year you try to do a little bit more, try to do a little bit better. You try to grow in it. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And, and then you'll find that then it takes the purpose on that, what it is. Because if you're really sitting there and fasting and really, really hard and you're not ready for it, the bad passions come out. And then it becomes totally useless in what it's supposed to be doing, which is, again, providing that not only bodily discipline, but spiritual discipline. And so it takes time. So use that time. So here's another quote from St. John Chrysostom. It's a long quote, but it's worth hearing because he likes to write about this stuff. So, fasting is the change of every part of our life because sacrifice of the fast is not the abstinence, but the distancing from sins. Therefore, whoever limits the fast to the deprivation of food, he is the one who in reality abhors and ridicules the fast. Isn't that interesting how he says that? If you see someone who is poor, show him mercy. If you see an enemy, reconcile with him. If you see a friend who is becoming successful, do not be jealous of him. If you see a beautiful woman on the street, pass her by. In other words, fast with your eyes and your tongues and all that other things. In other words, not only should the mouth fast, but the eyes and the legs and the arms and all the parts of the body should fast as well. Let the hands fast, remain clean from stealing and greediness. Let the legs fast, avoiding roads which leads to sinful sights. Let the eyes fast by not fixing themselves on beautiful faces and by not observing the beauty of others. If you are not eating meat, are you? You are not eating meat, are you? You should not eat debauchery with your eyes as well. Let hearing also be fast. The fasting of hearing is not to accept bad talk against others and sly defamations. We're coming up to my favorite line of St. John Chrysostom. Let the mouth fast from disgraceful and abusive words, because what gain is there when, as on the one hand, we avoid eating chicken and fish, on the other hand, we chew up and consume our brothers? He who condemns and blasphemes as if he has eaten brotherly meat, as if he had bitten into the flesh of his fellow man. It is because of this that Paul's frightened us, saying, if you chew up and consume one another, be careful that you do not annihilate yourselves. So I love that line. We abstain from meat, but we devour our brothers. So I just think that's just masterful. So, or as the other one goes, it goes on in this passage, if we can't control what comes in our mouth, how can we control what comes out? And that's where we see this idea of spiritual fasting. So fast with your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your actions, and then fast from food. It's actually low on the list. Do not judge others. Do it as you can. I remember, and again, each year and year you grow. So one time we had a clergy retreat, and Mother Gabriella of the Romanian monastery in Michigan was, giving a talk to all these clergy. And I remember very clearly, she's a firebrand and quite happy. She looked at the priest and he said, during Lent, she looked at, don't talk about food. Stop talking about food, because that's what ends up happening is you start to obsess about food because you've given up meat, you've given up dairy, you've given up all these things. My wife and I, we always try to start off, we have great ideas for menus and, we're going to try it different this year. And by the end, we're eating fish sticks or meatless pasta, But the idea is if the more you think about food, then you're destroying the purpose of the fast. So you just do it. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Just do it. And I know it. I always know sometime it's usually around right after the Sunday of the Cross, I get this pepperoni craving. Every year I get a pepperoni craving. I don't know why. Maybe it's my Italian side, whatever. And I know it's a temptation. I know it. But you see, what has happened is when you fast, all your inhibitions start to go down. And as the church fathers say, now you can confront your passions face to face. So my pepperoni is my passion there, shall we say, during Lent. But now I know it's coming. In seminary, we call them the purple demons because, we're all in purple. And you got the purple demons coming out at the end of Lent, and everyone's angry with each other, and everyone's grumpy with each other, and this happens in every house, you just want it over with, right? Because can we just get to Pascha? That's the key. That's the point when that's where we're supposed to be. So now we could start praying more and doing all the things that we can to overcome them. And then be able to celebrate Pascha. Of course, here's the bad news I hate to give you all. Next year, it'll be something different. And if you come a certain distance on your fasting, there's always going to be something new, and something more, and something better. And then you confront them. It's infinite. It's infinite because we can infinitely grow towards God. So again, you're going to get stripped down. You're going to be at your most vulnerable at some point. You're going to, and that's the time. But here's what we have to go back to what Christ says. You're doing it in secret and you're doing it with joy. So you're actually confronting those demons with joy. And that's really important for us to understand. How we have to be joyful in the fast as hard as it is. Because just like you have to go through Golgotha to get to the empty tomb, in our own spiritual life during Lent, we have to go through Golgotha to get to Pascha. So just remember that. So here's the summary before we get on to some practical stuff. The whole point of fasting is so that we can regain control over our bodies. That the bodies don't control us, but we control them. Right? If we can't control what goes in our mouth, how are we going to control what goes out of our mouth? We need to simplify our lives. That's the whole point, right? Is to simplify during Lent. Someone called it the tithe of the year, the part of the year that we give up to God. It's supposed to lighten our loads. We're supposed to pray, discipline, abstinence, purity, living as we're supposed to have lived before the fall, with concentration on God. And again, fasting is a good preparation with effort. If you remember one of the gospel stories when the disciples came and why they couldn't cast out that demon, and Christ said we can only cast out that demon with prayer and fasting. And why is that? Because then that focuses us on what we're supposed to be doing and praying for. And I do know a number of clergy and a number of bishops, for example, if they have people in their diocese or their parish who are I'm just going to say it like this because they do it in secret. Who are going through tough times or surgery, they will fast and pray during that time, and it's quite humbling when people take it that seriously. So now that's the background, but of course, inevitably, because we're Orthodox, right? So the Orthodox is a very measured way in which we approach everything, right? And so a lot of this was thought out, and it was practiced, and it was promulgated throughout the church. So the fasting rules that we have are something that developed over time. And so what we have now really was a development of 2,000 years. And I mean that. I mean, not only from Jewish time and the fasting rules that they had from Judaism, but even into the early church. For example, one of the earliest Christian documents we have, which it's disputed, but it really is the first century, not long after Christ's resurrection. It's called the Didache, which means the two ways, the way of light and the way of darkness. And it's a very early Christian document. It predates the Bible being put together. And the Didache is very fascinating because by the way, that's the first place where we hear talk about the Eucharist and how the service of the Eucharist is supposed to be done. So even in the earliest times of the church, they're already talking about the Eucharist and the rules. And it's interesting because it says when you fast, it has fasting rules in there. And in it talks, that's the first place where you hear the Wednesday and Friday fast. It said, don't be like the Jews who fast on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but Wednesday and Friday. Why Wednesday and Friday? Wednesday was the day of the betrayal, and Friday is the day of the crucifixion. So even early on, they were doing that. So they were starting to work through this and round it out. And the cycle of fast started to emerge. So even by 325 at the First Ecumenical Council, they were already putting together a lot of not only the rules of the fasting, but the cycles and why they were doing it. So, and it wasn't done, by the way, as oppression or control, but rather, again, to assist someone to work through the essential part of Christian spirituality without making it up. See, that's something that's I find of interesting. So forgive me on this, but so I have a number of friends who are evangelicals and fellow clergy that I've known over the years, and they always get very excited. Well, we're going to fast. They just rediscovered fasting, and they come up with all these rules about, well, we're going to do it on this day and then do this, and I said, well, we've already worked through all of that, the church. If you look at the Orthodox Church, we've already worked through it because it's time tested. And it's not up to me to make it up, but the church does it. The other thing is, and when you try to make it up, by the way, it invariably, it becomes self-centered and you miss the point. There's a wonderful story by Chekhov. Chekhov, his father was a deacon. He had a real insight into the church, and Chekhov wrote these short stories. That was his way, and the story is called The Murder. And so it was these two brothers who they didn't like the priest. The priest smelled like tobacco and alcohol, and he didn't do the services correctly, and he cut corners, and they didn't like him. So they decided they were going to be really the church. That they were going to do the vigil absolutely correctly on their own, that they would do all that they needed to do and just disregard the priest and the church. They were going to be the really holy ones. And what ends up happening is the one brother murders the other brother because he ate olive oil on a Friday. Wow. So you see, be careful. Be careful. So what do we mean by fasting? Does that mean, you hear that, I'm giving up chocolate for Lent, or, I'm not going to watch TV for Lent. And that's certainly a good part of it, and that's an important thing. But it's not the real essence of it. Just giving something up is not what we're doing for fasting. It's got to be much more to that. Now, remember, the rules that we'll talk about were put together basically and developed in monasteries. So if you look at, like in the Ruber's book, it'll tell you, you'll see certain notifications like fish day or oil day or, strict fast day or whatever it may be. They were basically monastic rules. Now remember, monks and nuns on the whole do not eat meat at all. So when they take the monastic tonsure, they don't eat meat at all. For them, a big celebration is they can have fish, right? And they can have a little bit of wine, and they can have olive oil. So what do they eat? Well, a lot of it is grains and boiled vegetables. They call it xerophagi, a way of cooking, basically boiling vegetables and things of that nature, which, by the way, you would think would be boring, but you go to some of these monasteries, they can really cook fasting food really well. I guess in modern day, you would say they keep vegan. They keep vegan. And so, and they've been doing that since, the time of St. Anthony. So it's not like it's something new that's been discovered. So, on the whole, if you, those are the rules that are put in the book. And then we translate them to our lives and our practical lives. Because, and it's interesting, okay, so fasting, first and foremost, generally means meat, all right? So anything that's kind of with a backbone. So beef, chicken, lard, broth, anything that comes from that meat, lamb, all that sort of stuff. That's all considered. Then you have dairy. So you have the meat fast, you have the dairy fast. And eggs are included in this. And dairy, obviously cheese, milk, those type of things. And then you have olive oil and wine. So you have 4 kind of ways in which you have the meat fast. So that's why when we see it coming up in Lent next week, it is meat fair. That means farewell to meat. That's the last day you're supposed to eat meat. And then on the Sunday after that, Forgiveness Sunday, is cheese fair. That's the last time you're supposed to eat dairy for Lent. And then why olive oil and wine? Luxuries. Now, wine, as far as the Eucharist, that doesn't count. That's the only time you should be able to do that. But to sit down with wine with a meal, so they were considered luxuries. So olive oil was a luxury. So your idea was to kind of simplify that.
Is it appropriate to ask any questions?
Absolutely.
Until the end?
No.
Well, you said it evolved over time. What about when, in the early centuries, when a lot of people had their own farm animals, and of course you don't just stop milking your cow or collecting the eggs, but if they're fasting from those, it seems like it would be more sinful to throw those things away.
No, they would sell them, they would use them, they would store them, they would do all the stuff that they needed to do, obviously. But remember, most people up until really, I'm going to say 16th, 17th century, didn't eat a meat-based diet. Mm-hmm. Meat was only for a special occasion. Why would you want to kill your pig? Because that's money out of your pocket, right? That type of thing.
I get that, just the dairy aspect, especially the milk and the eggs.
So they would have that, and they would sell it, and they would, because not everybody kept it. Mm-hmm. Even the monasteries kept those animals, and they would sell it. But, so again, we're talking the monastic fast. Okay. They would be abstaining from it. But, it's interesting, because even if there was a story, an account written that in Moscow in the 19th century, when you went to a restaurant during Lent, you couldn't find meat on the menu. Even the restaurants fasted. Now, I don't think that happens anymore, but like if you go to Mount Athos, they have all these animals and stuff, but you don't eat meat while you're on the monastery. That's why when all the monks get off the monastery for a trip, the first thing they do is they go and they eat all the food they're not allowed to eat. No. Archbishop Alexander tells that when he finally got off the monastery, he said he and his brother monk ripped into a chicken like it was nothing. There was only bones left at the end. So, but again, now, so what's the other stuff? So sometimes you'll see to say fish with a backbone. What is it? Well, that's like any fish, right? It has a backbone. There's theory that comes from Jewish, the idea of not eating anything with the blood, but really it's not. The reason they do fish with the backbone, it's considered a luxury, first off, because you had to go out and do something to catch it. So again, think of monks, right? So you would have to actually work to get that fish. You have to go fishing or, whatever. But yet, and sometimes, so during monastic fasts, like during Lent, when you have the Feast of Annunciation, their big, shall we say, their big luxury, their celebrations, they get to have fish with a backbone on that. On Annunciation. But fish without a backbone is always good to eat. So what's fish without a backbone? Listen to this. Lobster, crab, oysters, mussels, all that stuff that's considered luxury food now was considered acceptable fast food then because it was considered junk food. It was stuff that you could just sort of collect. You can just sort of catch easily. And so by the way, during Lent, lobster is always good, but don't enjoy it. So I had one professor used to say, yeah, if we looked at it like in today's modern way of thinking, like, yeah, probably a hot dog would be...
Right, for a pizza.
Or, yeah, which then, because hot dogs probably don't really have meat in it anyway, but yeah, you know, like something that's simple and easy and you don't have to work much for. So, you know, that's what you're thinking. And again, a lot of it is boiled vegetables, grains, things of that nature. So that's it. But it's also important because in these fasting rules, it also talks about very specifically it talks about the number of meals you eat each day, the size of the meals, and the way it can be prepared. So frying is much more extensive. You don't want to fry as opposed to boiling, like, you know, whatever. Obviously, someone thought this out. So it's really, when you think about it, it's because you could do this, right? You know, you make a big plate of like halushki, you know, noodles and cabbage, and I love it. I can eat a whole bowl of it, and then you realize, oh my God, did I just eat all of that? That's not the point, right? Yeah, I kept the letter of the law, but I missed the whole point of the fast. So limit what you eat, limit the meals. Some people even give up a meal. And that's my advice for people who are vegetarians, because they always ask, well, we don't eat it anyway, so how do we fast? Then give up one meal. Give up one meal a day, which is hard, by the way, if you get used to a certain way. So anyway, and don't get Pharisaic about it. I remember, oh my God, and you could see these on the list, the clergy lists and other things, that people, you know, they're reading labels to see, you know, they're in the store and they're reading labels to see if there's anywhere in there like, oh yeah, this has whey in it, and whey is technically a dairy, therefore I can't eat this. Or, you know, Jell-O, which is made out of cow's hooves or something, you know, the gelatin or something. So you can get very Pharisaic about it, and that's not the point. You just do it. You can be exempt from fasting for 3 reasons. I'll give you the 3 reasons you can. Oh, yeah, someone said, oh, I love lobster. See? There you go. So anyway, so 3 reasons. First is health concerns. No one wants you to get to fast to the point where you're going to really harm your health. So if you need to eat because of your health, for example, this happens a lot with people who say, oh, you know, I have to take a medication, and then that medication says I have to eat something with the medication. So yes, eat something with the medication, obviously. Don't be silly. The other one, which is health. The other is, and this is a good one, when you're traveling, you can be exempt from fasting. Now, this is the one that every priest and monk tries to loosely define what it means to travel. You know, in other words, why was that? Because sometimes when you travel, you can't always find those type of foods, which is kind of ridiculous these days because any rest stop now has, you know, a salad or something, or, you know, you can eat that is fasting. But, you know, people would always say, oh yes, you know, I'm driving from here to, you know, my mom's house in Little Falls, therefore I'm traveling, you know, so therefore I don't have to fast. That's not what we mean. Like traveling, when you mean like you're really traveling, like a long distance. I remember I was flying to Rome with Metropolitan Tikhon. Him and I were flying for Rome for the installation of Pope Francis. And so I had put ahead of time to the Air Italia that it was during the first week of Lent, and that we were not, you know, give us a meatless meal. And so when the time came for us to be fed, it was a meal full of meat. And so that brings me to the 3rd rule, which is you eat what's put in front of you, and you don't make a big stink about it. You can get you can offend the other person. And so, for example, when I was in Montana and I would go out and do my visitations, and sometimes I would go out, and I remember one time I went out to a ranch. It was, 5 hours in the middle of nowhere, and it was Lent, and what did they give me but a beautiful steak? Well, what am I going to do? You can't say, oh no, I'm not eating that. It'll make them feel bad. so you eat the steak and don't enjoy it, but you eat it. So then you try to time your visits there during Lent. No, don't do that. So again, fasting is the means, it's not the end of itself. So those three things, your health, and you talk to your priest about this, is your health reasons, when you're traveling and you cannot have any other options but to eat what is available, and third, when someone serves you something that's not fasting, you eat it and you don't say a word. Anyway, so when do we fast? Now we'll get into a little bit more about that. So if you actually count up, and if you look on our church calendars, you have the little shaded things. They are considered fast days. If you add it up, you roughly come to about 180 days in a year. So about half the year you're fasting from meat. And of course there's different rules with each of those types of fasts. So normally Wednesdays and Fridays. Wednesdays and Fridays you just do that. You just don't eat meat on those days. And that's just the normal path in which you do. You don't even think about it. If you grow up in the church, and your family, sticks to that, you just don't eat meat on Wednesday and Friday. There it is. Unless it's fast free like this week, where you have fast free on Wednesday and fast free on Friday, then you can eat meat, which is why I'm going to get a hamburger tomorrow. A bacon cheeseburger, actually. The most unfasting of all fasting foods. Anyway, so Wednesday and Fridays. And normally you should fast from midnight to the time you receive communion. So I remember as kids when we would sleep over the priest's house, and then we'd have like get-togethers and stuff, and we all had to get the last meal in before midnight because then we couldn't eat anything, and we'd raid his kitchen. But fasting, why is that? So when you receive the Eucharist, that's the first thing that's on your stomach. Again, if you have to take medication and do all that, but you shouldn't really have your morning cup of coffee for coming to church, right? So midnight to the time you receive communion. That's the ideal, and that's what you should strive for. If it's an evening liturgy, like a pre-sanctified liturgy, normally I advise people, noon to the time that you do that. So have something for breakfast. Some people just need to have something for breakfast if they're going to try to fast until pre-sanctified. Just do it and don't think about it and don't talk about it. Just get it, and it has to become just a routine. So we have extended fasting periods besides the Wednesdays and Fridays. And when we mean Wednesday and Fridays, unless it's indicated, no meat. So what are the extended fasting periods? Well, we have 4 of them in the church. And it's almost like each season. So you have Great Lent. So you have the 40-day fast plus Holy Week. Then you have the Apostles' Fast, which no one has ever been explained to me why we have that. But the Apostles' Fast starts after a certain point after Pentecost. And it can be as much as one day. In fact, we can even have a negative fast because it depends on how late Pascha is, hence how late Pentecost. Or in some cases, it can go as long as 30, 40 days, as long as Lent. Thankfully, that happens very rarely. But usually, it's like last year, we had a one-day fast for the Apostles' Fast. This year, I think it's like 10 days. That's usually about where it is. And then we have the Dormition Fast, which is August 1st to August 15th, in honor, because Dormition's on August 15th. And then we have the Nativity Fast, which is from November 15th to Christmas Day. So those are our extended fast periods. So already you could see how those days add up to 180, just with the extended period fast plus the normal Wednesdays and Fridays. And then we have special days of fasting. It's just one-day fast for special feast days. So And usually these are called strict fast days. And what does a strict fast day mean? It means that you really should not eat anything from sunrise to sundown, or eat minimally. And that's what it means. So you have Christmas Eve, December 24th, the Eve of Theophany, January 5th, Beheading of St. John the Baptist, August 29th, which has its own little weird rules as well. You have the Elevation of the Cross, September 14th. And then you have the very, 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 really, really, really strict fast day, which is Holy Friday. It's so strict of a fast day that's the only day of the year where you cannot serve a Eucharist. So that's what, you have all those services with the shrine. We don't even have the Eucharist. Because actually during Holy Week, you actually have pre-sanctified Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then Thursday, you have the celebration of the first Eucharist. But Holy Friday, you have no Eucharist. And then Holy Saturday, we have the Vesperal Liturgy and then Pascha. So that's a very, 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 really strict fast days. But with the church, we also get fast-free weeks. We have times where the church says, go at it, enjoy. Like, for example, this week, which is the week after the publican and the Pharisee, which is very interesting. If you listen to the epistle reading last Sunday, it talked about don't fast with the hypocrites. And the church said, don't be a Pharisee. So you know what? Go and eat anything you want this week as a way to kind of prove that. So we have fast-free weeks. Well, we have and it's also usually a way to prepare. So from the Feast of Nativity to the Eve of Theophany is a fast-free week. Go to town. The week after Sunday, the publican Pharisee, we just talked about that. Bright week after Pascha, right? Go to town. In fact, some monasteries even keep the monastic fast, will allow their monks to eat meat on Bright Week. They actually will allow them to do that just as a way of celebrating. And in certain cases, like the Antiochian Church, they will not fast from Pascha all the way up until Ascension. Basically, as long as we're singing Christ is risen, you don't have to fast. That's an Antiochian kind of rule. Trinity Week, which is the week after Pentecost, which is a nice contrast when you think about it. So you have Pentecost, the first time since Pascha, since Lent, that you get on your knees and you do it with the kneeling prayers we do on Pentecost. And what does it tell us to do? After that penitential set of prayers and all the long prayers that we do, have a fast-free week. So it's a nice contrast in how that does that. So anyway, and so again, you have your fast-free weeks. Enjoy, go for it, and now you could see why, and especially if you're coming into the faith and never seen this tradition, particularly of the Slavic traditions, where they have the Pascha baskets, right? And it's all filled with all these, ham and kibasi and all these different cheeses and all these different meats, because that's all the stuff they haven't been able to eat during Lent. And then, of course, what happens? People who have been fasting and they don't know to take it easy, they start eating it all, and then they all run to the bathroom because their body's not ready for it. So take it easy on that. But I used to love in Montana because I had, people would bring all sorts of things, bring in venison and elk and buffalo and all sorts of different meats. And it was fun because everyone sort of shared all that stuff. So again, don't binge on Pascha. So again, if you see wine and oil allowed, that means it's a slight lifting. So Annunciation, Transfiguration, which is during the Dormition fast, you can enjoy that. Anyway, we're almost done here. So again, just take it easy. Look and see. The rules are there. None of us can really fulfill those. All of us struggle. Everyone has a way in which they have to learn to build it up. But again, it's not the point that we're not eating this food. The point is that we're not only disciplining ourselves, but we're also focusing and allowing ourselves to focus more. Again, if you're a vegetarian or any of that stuff, eat smaller portions, give up a meal, eat right. That's the other thing. Is even though you're fasting from meat and dairy and all that sort of things, make sure you eat correctly, because it does, if you're not used to that, it does take a toll. Again, by the end of Lent. I don't know how strict do you keep the fast, but you don't have to tell me because it's secret. But, if you're doing it right, it gets a little annoying. So do that. And so anyway, I want to finish this discussion on fasting with the positive message. So St. John Chrysostom, again, we always go back to St. John Chrysostom. And if you remember, there's a sermon that I read, the priest reads on this, the Paschal Sermon of St. John Chrysostom, right? So we've all gone through the Lenten journey. We've all gone through that. We're finally at that point of Pascha. And listen to what John Chrysostom says during his Paschal Sermon. If any man be devout and love God, let him enjoy this fair and radiant triumphal feast. If any man be a wise servant, let him rejoice entering into the joy of the Lord. If any of you have labored long in fasting, now let him receive his recompense. And if anyone has fasted from the first hour, let him today receive his just reward. In other words, if you fasted from the beginning. If anyone has come at the third hour, let him with thankfulness keep the feast. And if any arrived at the sixth hour, let him have no misgivings, because he shall no way be deprived. And if anyone is delayed even to the ninth hour, let him draw near, fearing nothing. And if any tarry even unto the 11th hour, let him not be alarmed for his tardiness. For the Lord, who is jealous of his honor, will accept the last as the first. He gives rest unto him who comes at the 11th hour, even as to him who fasted from the first hour. He shows mercy upon the last and cares for the first. And to one he gives, and the other he bestows a gift, because he both accepts the deeds and welcomes the intentions, honors the act, and praises the offering. So, not that that's forgiveness, that we could just go ahead and just do it, but what John Chrysostom is saying is that all of us are in a different place. And yet we all need to come and celebrate Pascha, because it transcends all of that. So in one he gives, and the other he bestows. And one he honors, and the other he gives thanks. And so, again, I can't tell you what to do. I can show you the rules. I can help guide you. I can help strengthen you, encourage you. I can be the example in what I do within my own life, which is probably the most important thing that I can do as a priest. But you have to decide what is the best for you. Again, fasting is not just about food. It's about so many other things around it. And so that's where we need to focus our attention. So as we come up to and getting close to Great Lent, really take time. Think about it. Think about what you're going to do. And in all honesty, do the best you can. And do it in all honesty, pushing it a little farther each year, a little farther. And do it so that it is spiritually beneficial to you, not because that's what the rules of the church are. The rules are there to liberate us, right? The rules are there so that we don't have to think about these things. The rules are there to give us a way in which we can see fasting as the gift and not the sort of oppression. Now, ask me that in the 5th week of Lent. But nonetheless, we have to keep it, and we have to understand what's the whole purpose of fasting. And if you have questions, you talk to me. But most importantly, as I started out, you do it with joy, you do it in secret, and you do it sacrificially, and you do it as a way of praising God. So with that, we'll do what we can do. If there's any questions, now is your time that you can ask me. I see there's a lot of comments here today.
I'll just throw out
Yep.
my personal observation for myself. I know I try to focus more on just simplifying what I eat in general, and for Holy Week, I'll try to really be strict as far as the letter of, the meat and the dairy and all that. But for the majority of Lent, I just try to keep it simple.
Yeah.
But keeping it simple in today's American society is a lot different than those laws written down. But then where I struggle is then I think to myself, am I just trying to rationalize falling short of what I should be doing? And
That is the modern first world problems that we have, right? We have too many choices.
Because it's very easy for me to come home and I have a hungry family. I just get a pizza and chop up some lettuce and have a salad with it. And that's very simple. It allows us to have more time for things that we should be spending time on. But gosh, there's cheese on the pizza.
Yeah,
so
the dairy fast, the meat fast, I think is fairly easy.
So I think it'd be
the dairy fast. I could tell you what in my family, with the kids, eat dairy. They have cheese, have fish. do what you have to do, especially when you have little kids, and you're lucky if you get them to eat mac and cheese, right? Some of the fussy ones. Have a pizza, that's fine,
So I find myself with that kind of dichotomy of, okay, here's what I could do easily in today's society, although it doesn't agree with the letter of the...
But even now, you can get so many of these vegan option cheeses and stuff.
That's true.
But it does, sometimes it requires more work, and therefore you're violating the idea of the fast. Just like, you have every now and then we'll get like the no dogs, which are kind of at times. But you have some of those things like the fake bacon or the fake chicken nuggets, and they really do taste pretty good. And then my wife and I always joke is like, we're sticking to the law of the fast here. I'm eating these fake chicken nuggets or whatever, and I'm pretty much enjoying them because they're satisfying my desire for that type of taste. And then we say, but we're violating the spirit of the fast here. We're keeping the law. So we try, but sometimes you can do that. You do what you can do. I know for me personally, even though it should be in secret, I'll tell you, usually I try to keep the first and the last week dairy-free. And other than that, we limit what we do in the dairy, but sometimes you just, I get it, I get it. It's hard, and especially if you have kids and you have family, and you're trying to deal with and if you're older and you have your own sort of issues that some people, they become lactose intolerant and all this. You do what you can do. Just do it out of a good spirit, and most importantly, be on the same page.
Right.
You don't want to argue over fasting. Like, there you go. You just lost the whole point.
The kids just mysteriously find that there's less junk food in the house.
Yeah.
And so they're naturally going to eat less junk food.
I mean, when I was in the Army, it was when we were in the field, you ate what was put in front of you. So you had your MREs and stuff, and lo and behold, now if you can actually request MREs that are, you could put down that you're fasting or abstaining from this, or you don't eat meat, and now you can get all these MREs that are meat free, and I'm like, oh my God, they have it easy now. So again, you do what you're capable of doing, and don't get hypocritical about it, and just and there's plenty of cookbooks, by the way. There's a gazillion of oh my God, go to Amazon and look up Orthodox Lenten cookbook. Every parish in the world has put out a cookbook, and there's some really good recipes in there. My wife and I have a couple of ones that we always sort of have standbys. Indian food is always great. My wife and I love Indian food, and if you eat real Indian food, it's totally acceptable for the fast. So, so you just do what you can do, and do it with a good conscience, and say, this year I'm going to do it, next year I'm going to try this and do it a little bit better. But again, simplify. That's the key, and I get that with pizza, right? It's easy. That's okay. And it's better to do that than to go through a whole thing in which you got to make the gluten-free and this and then and then all of a sudden you're all like exasperated. So don't be so obvious, basically, is what I'm saying. And just, try to think it out too. And the more you do it, the more you just get used to it. And again, don't overthink it, as Mother Gabriella used to tell. Don't talk about food. Just do it. Just do what you can do. All right, there it is. Everyone have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next week.